of course, the digital world matters, but the physical is how we experience life. And so, how are we creating those experiences that are creating memories for us? That's ultimately what a lot of marketing is about, is how we're remembering a product or a brand or something. Run it up.
Welcome back to Brands in Play, your podcast for everything immersive marketing. I'm Nic Hill, co-founder and chief innovation officer at Sawhorse. And this week, I'm excited to introduce our special co-host of the month of March, Val Vacante. Val is a global innovator, top 25 women in tech, and one of the sharpest strategic minds operating at the intersection of media, emerging tech, and brand innovation. I've followed her immersive marketing work back when she was at Dentsu, and we're stoked to have her co-hosting the show. Welcome, Val.
Thanks, Nick. Excited to be here and jump in. This week in the news, we're diving into Amazon's pivot towards cloud gaming, Uno's evolution across digital platforms, the accelerating creator revolution, and the rise of AI companions.
That's right. And for our real-time review, I'm taking you into the new Sandbox Season 7.
Then, later, we'll be speaking to Katie Pereira, the Director Conference Strategy at South by Southwest, one of the most innovative and funnest marketing and cultural conferences out there.
And if you're enjoying Brands in Play, make sure to give us a follow. Every week, we break down how brands, platforms, and creators operate inside gaming and immersive media.
Let's get into it.
Let's go.
Run it up.
Val, what's up? We made it happen. You're on the show co-hosting. We're excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here, Nick.
Awesome. Well, what's going on in your world?
So what's going on in my world, I am so excited because it's March. And what happens in March every year?
South by.
Big event. Yes, exactly. South by Southwest. I've been fortunate to be a South by Southwest advisor for many years. South by is very near and dear to me. And I know you and I have some announcements to talk about
Yes.
South by.
So, for the first time ever, we're actually going to be doing a live recording of Brands in Play at South by at the Red Thread X House on Saturday, March 14th from 2 to 3 p.m. Central Time. If you're in town, please reach out, show up, because it's going to go off.
And on top of it, so that's all things Saturday, all things Brands in Play Live, which I am excited to be a part of. But what's happening on Sunday is the official South by Southwest session, Innovators Today and the Future of Play, which I am so excited about because in addition to you, Nick, we're also going to be joining Chris Down, the Chief Design and Innovation Officer at Mattel, Mitchell Berger, the Executive Vice President of Global Commerce at Crunchyroll, and really talking about all things technology, partnerships, mixed world, and play. So I can't wait to dive in. And that session, for those of you going to South by Southwest, will be taking place Sunday, March 15th from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. at the Austin Marriott downtown, Waller Ballroom D. So see you there.
That's going to be awesome. I'm stoked. One of my favorite conferences. Excited for this episode, but let's keep it moving and let's go to the news. So our first story is focusing on Amazon's cloud gaming pivot. I saw this come up and it got me thinking about Amazon. I wanted to do more research and understand the space a bit more. But essentially, Amazon made this AAA game called King of Meat. But just after 6 months, the game is not performing. So they're going to basically sunset and cancel the whole experience. This game is a multiplayer action dungeon crawler with co-op and party elements. It was launched back in October on PC, PS5, and Xbox. And Amazon had really high expectations for this game. They were expecting like 100,000 concurrent users, but its top peak on Steam was about 320 players. So definitely did not perform at the level that they wanted, and they are shutting it down and refunding, all the users who had spent money on that game. And I think it's a good reminder that like brands coming into gaming, it's much easier said than done. It is very difficult to have a persistent game that monetizes and finds success. So it's a real world reminder. So what Amazon is doing is they also have this platform called Luna, And so what they're doing is kind of shifting away from this big budget game publishing model and more into the cloud gaming strategy of owning its own platform. I haven't really played Luna, but I learned a bit about it, so I was going to share it here. It's a platform that lets you stream and play games over the internet without needing a console. And the games run on Amazon servers and stream to your device in real time. And I guess there's about 100 games on there with a lot of like known IP in the gaming and entertainment industry. And what's interesting is they have about somewhere between 0 and 5% of the cloud gaming market, which actually is pretty big, considering that it hasn't been around that long. The game types are about like party gaming and social experiences, and it's really designed to drive more engagement with the Prime ecosystem, which makes sense. Kind of similar to what Netflix is doing with its gaming, connecting it to its entertainment side. But yeah, I'm new to this platform, but are you familiar with it at all?
I haven't uh, played with Luna at all, but it is interesting, especially that Amazon owned Twitch. So it will be interesting to see if there's any crossover play. Are there going to be more community involvement? Because as you talked about in the previous story, there were some misses there
Yeah.
in terms of community. So maybe this is a way of kind of hopefully integrating the power of Twitch, fingers crossed, into this platform. We'll see.
Yeah, it would make sense for it all to kind of like align together. And I think one key takeaway for brands is, this is not a UGC gaming platform like Roblox or Fortnite that you can easily spin something up. But if you do want to do an integration, it's probably easier to get into these titles. And I think this, if it continues to grow, is a focus area brands should be looking at. But what's your story?
So, my story, we are going to reimagine a classic and talk about how Uno is becoming a playable digital experience. So, let's talk about the power of play and how brands are really reimagining that across audiences. Nick, you talked about brand integration. Well, this is one I'm super excited about because Uno, we know it's that physical card game. It's been around over half a century.
Everyone knows Uno.
Years, right. Um, and it's something you kind of grew up with. But what's interesting now is how Mattel is really rebuilding this classic for the generation today, who's really into those immersive gameplay experiences. Mattel just didn't go straight into Roblox, but they actually launched both Roblox and Fortnite in
Yep.
the same week. So on Roblox, the experience was developed by Preloaded and Mattel, and it's called Uno Bridge Clash.
Yep.
So it's turning Uno into a fast-paced bridge building race. Players must match cards, build bridges, race towards the golden Uno card, and trigger those wild. Do you remember the wild cards?
Oh
So
yeah.
really triggering those wild power ups that blow, block opponents, and they really create that chaos of gameplay. So very different than your traditional card play. It's really movement driven, social, replayable, and Nick, as you know, that's exactly what performs well within those Roblox communities. The other one, Mattel Digital Studios, also teamed up with Fortnite creative developer Look North World to
Yep.
create Uno Royale for Fortnite. And this focus really shifts from that deck building, that card play experience we talked about, strategy and social competition. So in the nature of Fortnite, players are crafting, they're collecting loadout cards, they're building their custom decks, compete across tournament arenas, and unlock shiny card skins. Because what's Fortnite without your shiny skins, right?
Yep.
um, and the gameplay, it feels very native. It feels very Fortnite creative. It doesn't feel like, hey, we plonked this IP into the game. They really did a nice job of translating experiences from that traditional card play into Roblox and into Fortnite. So again, a great example of a blueprint for other brands to look at when they're exploring those interactive ecosystems.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. I really think that Mattel is smart. They understand tons of gaming platforms and different ecosystems, and I love how they're taking the IP and adapting it because you could see a lot of brands coming in and being like, "Yeah, Uno, it's a game that everyone knows and the game works, so just do that game in all these places." But it's not as easy. as that. And I feel like the way they designed these sort of taking the IP and then kind of made it work within these sort of new game types that work with these platforms, you're going to see a lot more success there. So that's exciting to see. So my next story is all about this marketing shift that creators are the new storytellers. And I think that this is a trend that's happening across the marketing ecosystem. But it was interesting because I saw a story that came out in Digiday that was all about how Dick's Sporting Goods ran a creator recruitment program offering about 60 paid storyteller spots for creator content. But what's exciting is that over 10,800 creators applied for this job, signaling this like massive high demand for creators to work with brands. And the job essentially is paying creators to tell authentic stories and not just promote products. And in essence, essentially, they are inviting creators to help create and shape brand storytelling itself. So I don't know. Did you see the story? Do you have thoughts on this at all?
I did see it, but it's so great to hear your perspective on it. I think this is critical, not only, and it's great to see from a brand from Dick's Sporting Goods, right? Because as we know, and as we're going to talk about South by, it is toys, it's gaming, it's sports, it's anime, it's all of those fandoms, and just critical to involve your community. So I'm excited to see how Dick's, they've reached out to the community and they're really enabling the community to tell their real story. So I'm excited to see what the creators come up with.
Yeah, and it's like really like anchored in that authenticity that we know works. And I think what it means for brands today in sort of a broader sense is that as we know the marketing landscape is just overloaded, oversaturated with messages. So like brands who really want to reach consumers in a deep way need to find a way to cut through directly. And this is in line with immersive marketing. I mean, brands need to build ecosystems where creators can live inside culture and produce content that audiences choose to engage with rather than be interrupted by, essentially like opting in,
Yes.
And there's this sort of parallel to the gaming and UGC gaming community, right? Which is like
Mhm.
you don't want to interrupt the gameplay. You want players to actually choose to play that or engage with that. And if your brand is associated with it, it's sort of like this win-win. So we're kind of seeing a parallel in the sort of social and video ecosystem. And I think the article goes on to say, in a more broad sense, that brands should invest in storytelling engines and even invest in premium entertainment, like films and docu-series, just basically like telling their brand stories in entertaining ways that are adding value and not interrupting people putting ads in front of their faces. So I don't know. I just love seeing this stuff. It definitely helps the medicine go down when you're talking about ads. So I hope we're going to see more of it this year, I think. What do you think?
I think so too. Yeah, and you use the word interrupted quite a bit in that, and I completely agree. I think for especially anything community or fan driven, it needs to be integrated. It needs to be a part of, not interrupted. So our last story is really all about evolving IP. Everything from AI companions to spatial arcade worlds. So let's dive into that. So IP, as we talked about with Uno, it's not just slapping that IP onto something, but really making it a part of the experience. And so, what's exciting this week is we saw Genies has partnered with King Records. And if you don't know King Records, they're the anime and music subsidiary of Kodansha, which is
Cool.
Japan's largest publishing group. You've probably seen a lot of their anime or manga in the world,
And
but
they're
it's
the company
very,
that has the licensing partnership with Roblox. So you can license some of
yes.
their IPs and monetize and split the revenue with Kodansha.
Exactly. Like, and again, as we talked about, having that community and creator space coming together, rallied around an IP. And so, what's exciting here is that the sort of first franchise they're diving into is Hypnosis Mike. It has a massive global fan base. There's 21 characters that are being reimagined into AI powered companions. So really bringing these characters that people know, love, into the AI world and really having that personalized experience together.
So you're
And
talking about, just so I understand it correctly, you're talking about like if I wanted a companion, I could basically have a companion of a character that's in one of these anime stories, then have conversations with them, like dialogue. in my life.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
correct. And I mean, interestingly, last year, a project I worked on, we had Chester the cheetah, from
Yeah.
Cheetos. And we actually had Chat with Chester and did exactly this, bringing that brand character to life. And so, what I'm excited about what Jeannie's has done is really, again, teaming up with Kodansha, all of this incredible anime IP. And I know we're going to talk about anime at South by Southwest, but the anime numbers are skyrocketing, not only
Yep.
here in the US, but around the globe. So, I'm just so curious to see how this experience plays out. As you talked about, Nick, it's really where fans can talk, explore, build those deeper emotional connections that fans have with those personalities. And I think we're going to see more of that, not only just from a fan perspective, but when you think about when different shows launch, for example, you're going to see more of that kind of companion based experience.
Yeah. I love that. It's exciting times right now. I feel like so many brands are being aggressive and going into these ecosystems. So I'd love to see that. All right. Well, let's jump into our real time review. All right, so for this week's real-time review, I jumped into the Sandbox Season 7. Val, are you familiar with this platform, the Sandbox?
Yes, yes. The Sandbox, like a couple years back, that's all you would see is like different brands pop up. Sandbox. It's when Metaverse was like the
The
word
top of
du
metaverse hype.
jour. Exactly.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I'm very like fascinated by this project, by this platform. It's a UGC gaming platform that is all Web3. So it's on the blockchain. It's a blockchain virtual world that's built on the Ethereum network, and it allows users to play, build, and monetize their digital assets and gaming experiences. So it's pretty much like Roblox, but on the blockchain with a much smaller audience. I guess that's one way of looking at it. But what's cool is like they are honoring this concept of true digital ownership because everything inside of this ecosystem is essentially an NFT. Everything from the physical land that you can buy to the virtual land that you can buy to the assets your avatar can have. And there's also a cryptocurrency token that's associated with the platform itself, which is called Sand, which you can purchase and, sell and all that stuff. So really interesting sort of approach. Small numbers, it hasn't had massive adoption, but it's been around and it's still here. Obviously, we all know that we're in this crypto winter right now.
Yep.
Pretty much all Web3 gaming has shrunken or disappeared. So like all these play to earn, play to win type of games have like sort of gone away. And the sand, the currency that's associated with this platform, has kind of dropped or lost 70% of its value over the
Wow.
past few years, which is pretty massive. But they're back for season 7, and they have all these new games and incentives to get the community engaged again. And they're really focusing on lowering the friction. And what they want to do is make it more browser-based gameplay
Okay.
because in the past, you had to download the launcher and play it like locally on your machine. Now you can sort of play in the, just off the browser with less friction, which makes sense. They're really doing a focus on retaining players, making the games a little bit deeper, making, designing it for players to come back and sort of engage for longer periods of time. They hope this will sort of grow the adoption of the platform. And they also have these rewards. They've got about $52,000 of prize money in
Hmm.
the form of sand that you can earn. So as you do quests and you kind of spend more time, you start unlocking things and you can get a portion of that money, which is interesting because they don't really have stuff like that on their traditional UGC gaming ecosystem. And one interesting thing is that in the effort for them to compete with other platforms like Roblox and Fortnite, when you monetize on the Sandbox, they don't take like any cut of those transactions. So if you can monetize your game, you keep all of that. Unlike the other platforms that take up to sometimes 60 or more percent of those transactions, they keep. So that's interesting. But season 7's cool because basically it's 32 unique experiences that have been added to the platform. And I guess half of those were made by native creators, not the platform itself. And so that's a big shift, indicating that more organic, builders are actually on the platform building and adding to it. And as far as brands, lots of brands are involved. Atari, Black Mirror, Terminator, Jurassic Park. Steve Aoki has been there for a while, continues to be there, and the Bruce Lee estate as well. So brands are engaged. And for my review, I jumped in, I played a little bit. I would say, the good is this is a real strong like vision of the metaverse. It's open, it's free, it's rewarding creators. You own all of your assets. So from that conceptual or theoretical standpoint, I got a lot of
Mhm.
love for it. Also, there's a cool retro edge to it. The entire platform is based on this sort of voxel art, this sort of block art. If you think like what Lego characters look like, or very simple sort of, you know, block-based artwork. It's also leaning into sort of old school video game culture. So it has like a kind of millennial vibe to it, which is interesting. Now, there are a lot of bad things that bump me on this. I will say that there was a lot of friction. So I know they're trying to remove that, but I was able to do some of it in the web browser. But when I wanted to get into season 7, they made me download the launcher. So I had to kind of go through all of those steps and wait for it, and that definitely is like a barrier to entry. Also, the first time user experience, the F-Tux is confusing. Like once I was in there, I was sort of like in the hub area. Um, I was a bit confused, didn't really know what to do. It would have required me to invest more mental energy to like figure it out and start getting involved, which I didn't. They didn't hook me enough to do that. I also think that the lo-fi graphics, the voxel art, is too limiting. It does look
Mhm.
cool for certain people, but what I love about the UGC gaming ecosystem is if you wanna create something awesome, you just create it. It doesn't matter what it
Mhm.
looks like, right? Like platforms like Roblox and Fortnite, you really can they look so different depending on how you wanna show up. This platform really limits your ability to do that, which I think is actually a strike against it. And then limited game types, they're not that complicated. The tool itself is not as strong as some of these other tools. So as far as like what you can build and how deep a game you can build, you're just limited. And the lack of community engagement. In order for a UDC community and gaming community to grow and become successful, you need a lot of people that want to be there, that want to build businesses, that want to engage. And I feel like I don't know if I'm seeing those numbers there. And last, is it innovative? I would say the only thing that's innovative here is the blockchain. The fact that you are
Mhm.
running an entire UGC gaming ecosystem on the chain is interesting to me, and I'll give it its props for that. But outside of that, I don't see a ton of innovation. Look, I want them to be successful. Like I'm kind of like a side fan, but I'm a little skeptical about like what's going to happen with this platform. But curious to get your take real quick.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's great to hear about your first time user experience through that. That was pretty consistent. Like a couple years back when there was a metaverse platform for everything, it that that experience was very harsh. And like you said, downloading, installing, it feels retro in a bad way,
Yeah, yeah, right.
right?
Like what we used to
Um,
do or what we used to have to do, you know?
Have to do it, that's it.
Yeah.
Um, I do think it is interesting because, in a weird way, because there are those layers, it is such a niche community, so it's almost like if you wanna go for the Bruce Lee, you know, fan club or whatever, or launching new, memorabilia, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it makes sense to tap this community. I think it's so niche, but if you want that target, this is the place to get it. I think
Fair.
also from an age perspective, I do recall seeing a lot more uh we'll call it explicit
Yeah.
types of things happening, on Sandbox, on Decentraland and those type of platforms. So
That's a
where
good
as we know
point.
with Roblox, you can't
Yeah.
really do
Good
that.
point about demographics. You're looking for an older audience, millennial audience, also an audience that actually has money or an audience that wants to be involved in crypto or, finance. You would want to go to these platforms, the like the Decentralands and the sandboxes.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Nick. It's awesome to hear your perspective on this and to revisit like the metaverse.
I know, right? It's like it was coming up on season 7. I was like, well, I gotta jump in here and talk about it. So I did.
We're going to dive in with our interview with Katie Pereira from South by Southwest.
Let's go.
Please join me in welcoming Katie Pereira, Director of Conference Strategy at South by Southwest. Katie has spent more than a decade shaping the Innovation Conference, building programs that elevate emerging voices, spark cross industry conversations, and showcase the ideas that are shaping tomorrow. She's a strategic force of who brings clarity, creativity, and community driven thinking to South by Southwest's most dynamic experiences. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Val. I'm excited to be here. You too, Nick.
Well, Katie, before we dive in, we'd love for you to share a little bit about you, your role at South by Southwest, and the work you lead across the conference.
Yeah, of course. So, like you mentioned, I'm the director of conference strategy, and that really covers everything from ideation to execution in the innovation conference. So, I work really closely with our team to identify the right voices. What trends are we seeing? What do we need to be talking about at this year's conference and the next 5 years of conference? And then everything through to where is someone speaking? How do we make sure somebody's on time? All of that, but really focused on how do we make the best experience? How do we showcase the content that is shaping the future for the folks that are in Austin? And that's where we spend, 90% of our time.
Awesome. Well, I gotta say that South by is my favorite conference of the year. I go to a ton of these things, and honestly, I kind of describe it as like a cultural festival, more than just a conference. So everything from like the film and the music to the innovation, all the marketing and executives that are out there, like it's just like attaching to culture itself, which is so awesome. Excited to have you on the show. But I want to know a little bit like what is the history of the conference? I don't even know. How old is it? And like did it start from one space and then evolve to something else? Like tell us more.
Yeah, so 2026 is actually our 40th anniversary, which is actually 40 years of South by Southwest music. That's where we got our start, and we continue to foster those deep ties between music and the city of Austin. What we now call innovations started in 1994, as it was then called media. Which made a
I
lot of
remember.
sense at the time, which morphed into both innovation and film in the late 90s. And the last 3 decades, we have morphed the Innovation Conference into what it is today. We've seen the rise and fall of so much technology from the dot-com boom to the advent of social media, explosion of VR and AR, and now, of course, the precarious market of all things AI, and really have just shaped the conference with how all things technology have changed in the last 32 years.
No, it's been so exciting. You touched on that kind of roller coaster of tech. And it's pretty cool that you've been there for like a fourth of South by's existence.
Crazy.
So I'm sure you've shaped and seen so many changes just in your time. So question for you, Katie, for anyone who's kind of new to the festival, how would you describe what makes South by Southwest, such a meaningful gathering for creators or innovators, makers in the space?
Yeah, I think Nick hit on this is it really is where business and culture collide. We're a place where it's a one-stop shop to getting ahead at work, and at no other conference do you get so many industries colliding with such meaningful impact.
Yep.
Um, and that's really what sets South by apart. One of my colleagues likes to say we're the Super Bowl of ideas over tacos and margaritas, and truly that is what is happening at South by. Business, culture, and of course the incredible culture of the city of Austin, kind of all layered on top of each other. Um, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, no, it stands out. I can't compare it to any other conference I've been to in a good way. But can you like focus a little bit on like what themes are shaping this conference?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's so much content. It's so hard to kind of distill into, one or two big themes. But a few things that we're seeing, of course, I mentioned this earlier, AI and the revolution of AI is everywhere. But a lot of that this year is tied to human connection. What does it mean to still be human in this age of AI? How are we staying connected in an increasingly isolated world? So, of course, the technology piece of it, but the human element is so important. We're also seeing a lot of content on what we're calling this creative renaissance. So, creativity is irreplaceable as a human skill, but how is human expression and that creative renaissance thriving in this digital economy? So, everything from what we're seeing in the creator space to physical design and all of those pieces that make our world. And then kind of on the marketing side, which is a huge portion of our event, kind of this idea of fandom and following. How are fandoms kind of shaping our world from a cultural identity, industry identity? Online followings are building movements and sparking trends overnight. And how are brands keeping up with that? How are creators keeping up with those fandoms that exist? And then all of this technology, the creative renaissance has led to a shift of consumer behavior. So, how we shop, how we engage with brands, how brands engage with us is changing. And how are we kind of existing in this world where everything we do is kind of shaped by an unseen digital nudge in one way or another? And how do we, as consumers and us as brands, kind of exist in that world, and what does it mean for the future of how we shop and how we exist? So I think those are some of the themes that are kind of coming out pre-event. Something that always surprises me on site, and I'm really excited to see what that thing is that pops up that was a little unexpected. But yeah, really excited about how the program's shaping up this year.
I love those themes. There's like so much to unpack there, but I think what's really interesting right now, it just seems like technology is, and with AI, it's at such a fast moving level that so much can be created and so much can be targeted, right? And personalized, but it's almost too much where it's like,
Yes.
I don't even want that. And then there's, like you said, the creative renaissance of like artists just leveraging those tools. Like, it's a very interesting time for creativity, I think.
I agree. I think that's something that makes South by so unique is we have both of those industries. We have the creatives, we have the folks building technology, and really curious to see where that goes and how we kind of find the right balance of the two because we've swung in both directions over the last 5 years, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's interesting when you think about creators or artists broadly in the trends that you're seeing, right? So, like, even from a design perspective, you're seeing almost the look of handmade look. You're seeing scribbles. You're seeing sort of like non fancy cursive writing, right? So, like, everything that looks handmade because people are kind of tired of that perfect, that perfect look. Equally, when we talk about kind of physical, digital experiences and what you were saying, Katie, about kind of shopping and marketing, um, I think people are very excited about those digital, concierges, if you will. But when they're buying virtual goods, and think about gaming, right? Like all of these virtual goods, if the platform shuts down, they're gone. And one of the things that I've thought was interesting is we're seeing with sort of Gen Alpha and Gen Alpha, those cuspers, um, the young Gen Zers, is that they are really seeking those tangible items, right? So it is like scouring, like comic book stores and like what are those tangible things, or I'm going to invest this much into the gameplay but not that much because they know and grew up with those platforms going away. So I think and then like you said with AI and how that's igniting creativity as a partner, I think across the board, we're seeing that, like, AI as an accelerator, but not as the be all end all. Like, I can't wait to hear these conversations at the show. But, but that's just, like, a great segue. So, like, all this is exciting, but what are you having the behind the scenes look? What are you personally the Katie take? What are the things we need to know? What are you excited about?
You're asking me to pick a favorite child, and that is so hard. I love all of the programming we have. Kind of from this perspective, when you take a step back, I'm really excited that we seem to be past the AI hype cycle. And we're not fully
Yes.
past it, of course. But we're really in those conversations of how do we merge AI and creativity? How are we actually implementing AI? What are the actual risks and rewards? So, from a content perspective, I'm really excited to, like you said, be past that hype cycle and be into the actual kind of nitty gritty of it. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to that, so I'm excited to see how that shapes out. But there's also so many physical activations happening at South by that I think are really important kind of partners in this content. So we can talk about it on stage all we want, but how are you actually experiencing it? And South by is such a place for that. A few that I'm really excited about. Rivian is transforming an entire city block into an immersive road course where you can experience their new R2 car in motion, not just, see it or see a standing vehicle, but actually it's being driven around a course in downtown Austin, which is going to be really fun. We have Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling is making its Austin debut. I think that's such a fun experience. And it's really just, again, how are we taking these brands and IPs and putting them into a physical space? We have an Invincible arcade pop up. It's exclusive pop up featuring a roster of the 10 of their playable characters.
Nice.
And then Burger Mart from Invincible is going to be brought to us by Brisk. It's actually going to build out Burger Mart, and you can get a burger and things. And so
Ooh, cool.
those are some of the pieces that it's just kind of taking it out of the ideological, out of the ideation of it, and putting it into physical practice. And I'm so excited for those experiences to kind of blend what's happening on stage at the event.
I love that. I love a good pop-up,
Yes.
IRL experiential activation. I'm curious, Katie, to get your take. Like, what do you think from a marketing standpoint the value is of going to like an immersive activation versus consuming an ad in another format?
That's a great question. I think it's such an opportunity to get hands-on with a brand, and I think it just changes the way you think. Talking to somebody on a screen is one way of marketing, but you change somebody's physical experience, their physical senses when you walk into a space. So everything from, this is why hotels put scents in their hotel, right? It's a memory evoking moment, and you have so much opportunity to create that in a physical space more than just what you're seeing or hearing when you have a digital ad or a digital space. And so everything from what you smell and what you touch, I think really just changes the experience altogether. And like we were saying, right, there's this. Of course, the digital world matters, but the physical is how we experience life. And so, how are we creating those experiences that are creating memories for us? That's ultimately what a lot of marketing is about, is how we're remembering a product or a brand or something. And so, the next time you eat fries and you remember that thing, it's a
Yeah.
really powerful connection. And I think, folks experiment at South by with these things, right? They're doing something for the first
Yes.
time. And so as a marketer getting to experience that and, they might not get it all right and you get to say, I think they did that really well. And if I was doing this, I'd do it differently. And then go do it. Go build the next activation.
I love that. Yeah, it's a testing ground for not only ideas but also for like activations,
Yeah.
which is great to have be judged by peers and kind of like move that conversation
And
forward.
people will, they'll share their opinions. Please do, right? Once they experience something, y'all too. I know you're going to be there, but, taking that moment to say, oh, this really hit and this maybe didn't, and that's okay. And we were gonna learn from it and experience something new. And there are activations that still get talked about 10 years later. And those are the moments we're trying to create. But what are the things that made those successful? There's little bits and pieces of it all across the program.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love that you touched on a lot of the themes that are being covered, but are there any like specific sessions or tracks that you want to highlight so for our listeners to maybe partake in?
Yeah, I have just a few when I was kind of looking at what your audience is. The first is we have a session with the president of Disney Consumer Products. Disney is kind of the GOAT in a lot of respects
Mhm.
for the brands, talking about how we're shaping brand relevance for the next generation. So really excited for that. Joost van Droon, if you don't know him, he's a professor and a CEO and advisor. He's coming back for his 2026 State of Play briefing on how games are forecasting the future of media, tech, culture, kind of all of that convergence. We see how those IPs are bringing their brands into new places, and games are such a great place for that to happen. So a lot of content on that. We also have a session on how CMOs are rewriting the rules of connection. That's really about authenticity in brand. Again, this like AI exists. How are we showing brand authenticity is so important. And
And more
actually,
storytelling, right? A
yes.
big
Yes.
focus on
Yes.
storytelling.
Yeah, and it's just so fascinating how we've kind of taken this shift back, like Val said, right? We're going to more handwritten, more physical drawing, that kind of thing. And then also you two are hosting a panel. You want to talk about
That's
it? I'm
right.
excited
On
about it.
Sunday.
So we will be there on Sunday, and I'm so excited because of course we'll be there with my co-host Nick. Our session is Innovators Today and the Future of Play. So really highlighting how play has always shaped how we imagine, connect, create. But some of the things that you talked about, Katie, when we think of play, it's not, of course it's toys, of course it's gaming, but also looking at those fandoms, right? So like anime, sports, emerging tech, and really looking at those evolving experiences.
And from a
Um,
brand, like, marketing perspective, like, Katie, as you were mentioning, you go to an IRL activation, something is happening, mentally that's different, you take something d away that's more valuable. I think there's something similar that happens inside of gaming. So it's like when you actually are leaning forward and engaging with something, from a branding perspective, it leaves a deeper impression.
Absolutely. Jose Andres is actually going to be talking about comic books at his session.
oh, cool.
And kind of bringing his story into a new medium. And I think that it's just such a fun moment to look at all of these different use cases of how we're shaping our perspective of those things.
And Katie, so every year I get excited about the different kind of like we're talking about the experience and the brand activations, and you touched on a couple of them, but like each year I love the expo and kind of, the XR space. So like is there anything in there that you can tell us or anything changing this year or what should we know about?
Yeah. So, in terms of expos, we have a slightly different footprint. We've broken our what we used to just have one large expo into two, a little more digestible. The first is our International Innovations Expo. So, really highlighting those things that are coming from countries outside the US and what are those technologies, those innovations that are shaping. A lot of folks are better at this than what's happening in the US. And I'm really excited to see kind of what's out there that we don't know about. And the other is going to be our Emerging Tech Expo. So that's all things emerging tech. Again, really excited to see kind of what's at the edge, the forefront um, of our technology, where we're headed next. I think that's going to be a great place again to get your hands on some of that stuff, not just having those theoretical conversations. And in our XR experience, of course, really excited for that. One of the projects I wanted to call out is we have a project produced by Snap. It's called Spectacular, The Art of Jonathan Yao
Mhm.
and Augmented Reality. It's actually going to be
Cool.
shown in their new spectacles. So a
Oh,
great
nice.
opportunity to see, again, new technology, see how that's working. There's going to be a conference session alongside that, deeper dive into the project, how artists are experimenting with smart glasses. I think we're kind of at the cusp of new tech and new reemergence of those smart glasses. So really excited for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the year of the smart glass, in my opinion. I think where so many wearables are going to come out this year, and I think it's going to change the landscape. Been talking about it for a while. Excited to check out what Snap's doing out there in a week or so. But I wanted to ask this question. I think it's really important. Is like, what tips do you have for attendees that are coming for the first time? And I feel like a lot of people who go to conferences without a plan can sometimes miss the most important stuff, or get
Yeah.
frustrated or confused. What advice do you have for like a South by first timer?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is impossible to see everything during South by. You can
And we
try,
should
and you're
mention
never gonna.
too that it's like a long conference, right?
Yeah,
That's
7
broken up.
days, and so it's a marathon, not a sprint. Take your time, but my biggest tip would be have a plan for your must-see events. I would say probably don't have more than 2 of those a day, but leave time for the spontaneity to happen. You don't know who's gonna be standing next to you in line, who you're gonna run into grabbing coffee, and be willing to go with the flow, right? Somebody you might run into Val and she's
Mhm.
headed to something amazing and you're just going to tag along because that sounds cooler than the thing you maybe had planned to do. The FOMO is real. It's okay. Um and you might not get into every single event that you had planned to. There's a lot of popular events during South by, but at any given time, there are dozens, if not hundreds of other things happening. Don't get too discouraged if you can't get into the thing you want to go to. Try something new. If I could attend the event, which I don't usually get the chance to, um, I would go to things outside my comfort zone. Like we said, this is a place of so many industries colliding. You don't get a chance to pop into, if you're in marketing, getting to go to a startup session or hear somebody pitch their startup, you don't get the chance to do that every day. So, of course, get the business done you need to get done, but take a chance to push your boundaries and go to something you wouldn't normally do.
I love that.
And then
And
I have
learn.
one very practical tip. It's going to sound bizarre, but this is something the South by team talks about internally. We tell all of our new folks, bring twice as many socks as you think you need. Changing your socks
Okay.
at 5 p.m. has this wild ability to re-energize your evening. I don't know what it is. Something about having a new pair of socks, even if you put your feet back in the same shoes, makes a difference. And so they're long days. Have an extra pair of socks.
That's a great point. If you take nothing away from this conversation, this episode, it's just bring extra socks to South by. Mm.
Look, I'm seeing like branded giveaways happening. Are we gonna have some South by Southwest socks? What's in the goodie bag, Katie? I mean, come on.
We do have a merch store and we have some pretty cool merch. We have been known to have some socks in there too. So
Well, Katie, we're starting to wrap our session here and really wanted to it's the tough question, right? What is the one thing that you hope every attendee walks away with from South by this year?
oh, that's so hard because it's gonna be a little different for everyone. But taking a step back, I hope every single person leaves inspired and equipped. Inspired to change the world, your life, your career, whatever it is. Um, the future is so full of endless possibilities. The 7 days that you spend at South by should inspire what you do next year or 10 years from now. So I hope that inspiration is the first thing you leave with. But more importantly, I hope people feel equipped for that change. So, whether you meet your next investor, you learn the tools to level up your career, you find the courage to start a new company, I want people to have those tools and strategies for what comes next. Um, and if half of folks have walked away with those things, I think we've done our job right. The future really is at South by. People who both attend and speak at the event are changing the future, and I can't wait to see what they build.
Well said. And I can speak from experience. I have walked away with a lot of positive it's, experiences being at South by, making new connections that have led to really cool stuff. So we appreciate the work that you do, Katie. We appreciate you for being on the show. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to South by.
Yeah, I can't wait to see everyone this later this week, which is crazy. We've been working on this event for a year and more, and we can't wait to show you what we've been working on, and um, can't wait to see all of you there.
Sounds great. Well, thank you, Katie. And let's go back to the show. All right, that was awesome talking to Katie. I've been such a fan of South by for a long time, so it's been really cool to actually listen to her and kind of look behind the curtain at like how things happen with that conference. I'm excited to go next week, and I definitely would encourage all of our listeners to check it out because it is by far, I think, my favorite conference of the year. What did you think of that interview?
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, Katie, she has been with South by Southwest for over a decade. So to hear her, phenomenal insight, kind of like seeing the evolving trends of what's happening at the conference, and like you said, getting that kind of behind the curtain or sneak peek. Like, I'm excited that now we have the sneak peek of all the cool stuff to go see next week, Nick.
I know, I'm ready. Well, cool. Let's keep it moving and let's go to the hit miss bet.
Okay, great. So our hit this week. I am very excited about because it has been the consistent thread through our conversation today. And the hit really being, IP holders who are understanding their community and they're understanding that not interrupting, as you said earlier, but integrating that experience. And so just kind of recapping that with, for example, we saw Uno, reimagine itself in the world of Fortnite and Roblox. We talked about the AI companions, with the genies and Kodansha, like phenomenal IP there.
Yeah.
Um, and then also, the retro arcade vibe and translating that into new play experiences with Retrocade. So I think the brands winning right now are the ones who aren't just plonking the IP on or porting, but really translating those experiences.
Yeah, well said. What's your miss?
Okay, so the miss this week, when you were talking about the story, Amazon's decision to sunset King of Meat just months after launching. I mean, this is a huge miss. And it's kind of proof or a reminder for brands that having a large budget, kind of like overproducing work, does not guarantee stickiness. It doesn't
Yeah,
guarantee success. And again, another reminder, a common thread throughout this episode is really co creating with your community, right?
great
With
point.
your fans, encouraging that participation and community momentum over and over. So, starting with your community and building from where rather than the old school build it and they will come mindset.
I love that. And the reality is like like the gaming industry is oversaturated. There's so many games and the competition is so high. So if you're a brand, like why compete? Why not just partner? Right? So I think that's one learning that can come out of this episode.
I love that. Yes. And I'll wrap it up with a bet. Okay?
What's your
So
bet?
yeah. So this week, my big bet is, playable strategy becomes non-negotiable. And Nick, I know in the world you live in, you've been a supporter of this for years, but it's really the importance of having that playable strategy, experimental, becoming foundational. What does all that mean? What that means is that, we're watching IP move from that static experience to interactive and immersive.
Hmm.
We're seeing the creators, as you touched on earlier, shifting from, hey, here's a promo to really co creating and sharing those stories. And then with Katie on the show today, rounding out that conferences are going to evolve. They're going to continue to be more immersive and more connecting. So this is not a trend. We're going to continue to see this shift.
I love that. And I think the reality is like brands just need to change the way they think. And people need to change the way they think. You can't just control the story. You can't just say, "I'm great, here it is. Look at me." It's just the world just doesn't work like that anymore because of the technology, the social elements that go into everything. Going into an era of, partnerships and a kind of um an openness and a vulnerability that I think is it's a wake up call to a lot of people.
Completely agree. And all right. So that brings us to a wrap of my first episode of stepping into co host here at Brands in Play with you, Nick. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh,
and
you're
the whole team
welcome.
for having me.
Thank you. You did an awesome job. You crushed it. Thanks for joining us. And the good news is you'll be here all month. So we're excited to see the guests that you bring on and, what you add to the conversation in the month of March.
Oh, thank you so much, Nick. And I'm excited. I can't wait for all of these strong conversations and Brands in Play live at South by Southwest. That's going to be amazing.
That's right. So we're excited to jump into that live episode. It's going to be a first time. I'm excited. Man, hold on. Let me. That's right. So that's a wrap on this episode. We're looking forward to next week. Edward, please read us out.
And that was Brands in Play. Thank you for joining the podcast where we explore immersive marketing and the people who are leading it. Our show today was produced and edited by myself, Edward Regu, alongside our creative producer, Dr. Giovanni Casamero. Be sure to join us every week for brand new episodes.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views, policies, or positions of host employers. The information shared during this podcast is based on personal experience and publicly available information and is intended for informational purposes only. Any references to specific platforms, companies, or partnerships are made in a personal capacity and do not imply endorsement, partnership, or official association with any organization mentioned.